Well, Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Shabbat Shalom.
Welcome to another beautiful Sabbath day here in Irving, Texas. And the title of today's study will be Eating and Drinking Unworthily. So the question came up a couple weeks ago, and I thought I'd take the opportunity to answer it, about what it meant to eat and drink unworthily. And it centers around the scripture here in 1 Corinthians 11. Paul gives an admonition to the church in Corinth, and he says, and it does center around conduct at Passover. So it's actually a good timely issue for discuss for Passover. And so for this reason, verse 30, many are weak and sick among you, and many sleep.
Or should you read it 27? I don't know. Pick it up at 27.
Okay, let's pick it up in verse 27.
27
Yes,
is better,
correct.
yeah.
Sorry. Therefore, whoever eats and drinks this bread or drinks this cup of Yahweh in an unworthy manner will be guilty of the body and blood of the Messiah. Let each man examine himself, and let him eat of the bread and drink of this cup. For he who drinks in an unworthy manner drinks judgment unto himself, because he does not discern the master's body. Therefore many are weak and sick amongst you, and many sleep. So this is quite a serious issue here, because we do have an issue of brethren falling asleep, being sick and weakly. And it seems to be, in this case, as Paul reckons, pertinent to the conduct at Passover, especially when we keep it in its context. So the answer itself is actually going to be found in the context of this letter and other places in this letter, but that will address the heart of the matter. However, before we jump there, do want to answer a question here. What does he mean by many sleep? Because it says verse 30, for this reason, many are weak and sick among you, and many sleep. Now this does in fact mean death. That means many have died for their unworthy conduct at the Passover. And this is Paul's conclusion of the matter. This is not mine. This is not my opinion, not my feeling. This is Paul's conclusion of the matter. Now, how do we know that death means sleep? Because it uses the word sleep here. Actually, in a few places in Scripture, and others, there are a few places in Scripture where we are told that death is likened unto sleep. Let's start with Psalm 13:3, please. We're going to address the issue of death equating sleep, or sleep equating death. Psalm 13:3. Consider me and hear me, O Yahweh, my Elohim, and enlighten my eyes, lest I sleep the sleep of death. That's pretty straightforward to the matter, that I sleep the sleep of death. I have a few others, a couple others. Let us try. Yes, let's try Jeremiah 31. 51:39. Jeremiah 51:39. '39 and 40. In their excitement I will prepare their feast, and I will make them drunk that they may rejoice. And sleep a perpetual sleep, and not awake, says Yahweh. And I will bring them down like lambs to the slaughter, and like rams with male goats. So he's talking about a perpetual sleep. It's not a good long afternoon nap on the Sabbath day. No, it says a perpetual sleep, from which they will not awake. Now, I can't speak for everybody, but that sounds like the second death to me that we read of in Revelation. We read of in Revelation 20. Let's also try, first let's try John 11, please. I want to go to Acts, but let's try John 11 first. John 11. Start in verse 3, then we'll jump forward to verse 11. Verses 11 through 14. John 11, verse 3. Therefore, the sisters, this is concerning the sickness of Lazarus. Now, a certain man, John 11, verse 1, a certain man was sick, Lazarus of Bethany, in the town of Mary and her sister Martha. And it was that Mary that anointed Yahweh with fragrant oil and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was sick. Verse 3. Therefore the sisters sent to him, saying, Master, behold, for him who you love is sick. Verse 4. And when Yahshua heard this, he says, this sickness is not unto death, but for the glory of Elohim, that the Son of Yahweh may be glorified through it. Through this story, we read later that Lazarus is in fact resurrected after being in the tomb for 4 days. But let's fast forward to verse 11. Meaning in John 11. These things he said, and after that he said to them, our friend Lazarus sleeps, but I may go and wake him up. Strange. It may sound strange. Then his disciples thought, oh, Master, if he sleeps, he'll get well. Let him get his sleep. If he sleeps, he'll get well. However, Yahshua spoke of his death. But they thought he was speaking about taking a rest and sleep. Like when we're sick, after we take a good long rest, a good long sleep, we feel better. Then Yahshua, verse 14, said to them plainly, Lazarus is dead. But I'm glad for your sakes that I was not there, that you may believe. Nevertheless, let's go to it. Continuing in John 11. Verse 21. Now Martha said to Yahshua, Master, if you'd been here, my brother would not have died. So again, the sleeping is still, we're still talking death here. But he spoke earlier that this sickness was not unto death. This sounds like a very strange saying here. But we're going to see what this means in a minute. Your brother will rise again, Yahshua said to Martha. Yes, I will know he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day. Yahshua said to her, I'm the resurrection and the life, and he who believes in me, though he may die, he will live. And whoever believes and lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this? She said, yes, Master, of course I believe that you are the Messiah and the Son of Yahweh, who came into this world. And we'll read the next few verses. Everyone's weeping and concerning in the morning concerning Lazarus. verse 37, of course, some of them say, there's always critics amongst the bunch. John 37, remaining in John 11, verse 37 says, some said, well, could not this man who opened the eye of blind have also kept this man from dying? Then again, Joshua, groaning in himself, came to the tomb, the cave, and stone lay against it. He gives the girls instruction to take the tomb away. Not the tomb away, take the stone away from the tomb. They said, no, we can't do that. He's going to be a stench. He's been dead for 4 days. He said, verse 40, he said, did I not say to you that if you believed you would see the glory of Yahweh? Then they took away the stone from the place where the dead man lay. There you go. They didn't see he's dead, where this dead man was laying. Joshua lifted up his eyes and said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I know that you have always heard me, and because of the people who were standing by said this, that they may believe that you sent me. Verse 43, when he said these things, he cried forth in a loud voice, Lazarus, come forth. Happy end of the story. He who had died, came out, bound hand and foot with grave clothes, and his face was wrapped in a cloth. And Joshua said, well, let him loose and let him go. And we read the rest of the story here in chapter 11. Some believe, some do not. Some got to go to scribes and Pharisees and tell on him. We got to put a stop to this. There's always critics, and there's always people you need to watch your background. So what we established here so far is that death is and what Paul is referring to here is that death equates sleep. There is one more, however. That's in John 7. It's Stephen's address to the Sanhedrin. John chapter 7. Acts. Why did I say John? Acts. Acts chapter 7. He'd given his address to the Sanhedrin, and they condemned him to death. Verse 60. Acts 7, verse 60. And they take him out to be stoned, and he knelt down and cried out with a loud voice. He said, Yahweh, do not charge them with this sin. And when he had said this, he fell asleep. So what we're getting here from Paul and his message to the Corinthians is that, among other things, when he referred to some of us people in the congregation having gone to sleep, by brethren having been weak and sickly and gone to sleep, that's exactly what he meant. They had died.
Curtis.
Yes,
What
come
was
on.
that? You said Acts 7?
Acts 7, verse 60.
60.
Yes, 60. Now let's back up to return to 1 Corinthians 11, and let's capture a little bit of context here, shall we? This is going to help explain this. A little bit of context. We're going to pick this up in verse 17. Now, in giving these instructions, I praise you. I do not praise you, or I praise you not. I do not praise you, since you have come together, not for the better, but for the worse. They're gathering for the Passover, and they're not coming. They're coming here for the worse, not for better. You think that an assembly of believers in Yahshua, if they were coming together for the Passover, it would be all for the better, right? But let's just see what's going on here. Why would he say this? First of all, when you come together as a church or as an assembly, either there are divisions among you, and in part, I believe it. He'd already visited these people once, and at least once that we know about, and based on what he saw and heard, he would explain why he said, I in part believe it. For there must also be factions amongst you, that those who are approved may be recognized among you.
It's you there, Curtis?
Yes.
You're still in Acts 7, right?
No, I'm in 1 Corinthians 11.
Okay, I didn't catch that.
We're in 1 Corinthians 11. Verse 19. For there must be factions among you, that those who are approved may be recognized among you. So, what's the implication here in this particular verse? Anybody? Any thoughts, any ideas? There must be factions among you, that because we're all studying for the truth, right? That's not what he says here. It says, for those who are approved may be recognized among you. They're looking for recognition amongst men. That's what these people are seemingly looking for. They're looking for some type of preeminence. Therefore, when you come together in one place, it is not to eat the Master's Supper. So when they're showing up in divisions, and as he explains here, it's not to eat. Their intent is not to eat the Master's Supper. Let's look at their conduct. Because after all, how many times have we heard it's not what we say so much, but it's what we do? Well, let's just see what these people are. Are they walking the talk? Like we hear a lot. If you talk the talk, you got to walk the walk. These people are falling quite a bit short. Therefore, when you come together in one place, it is not to eat the Master's Supper. For in eating, each one takes his own supper ahead of others. One is hungry, and another is drunk. What? Don't you have houses to eat and drink in? Or do you despise the church and shame those who have nothing? What am I going to say to you? Shall I praise you for this? I will not praise you. We had those, they were feasting, they were having a good old time. They were drinking away, and they were basically being gluttonous as hell, while others got nothing. Because when we gather for Passover, what are we really doing? It is in part, yes, a memorial
It's in remembrance.
to the events in Exodus. That's right. But why else? Because it is in part a priestly exercise. Now we're not doing it, it's not from Levi, but according to the order of Melchizedek. It is Passover to us on this side of the death and resurrection of Messiah. Is in part our induction, our initial induction into the priesthood of Melchizedek. Verse 23, for I received from Yahweh that which I also delivered unto you. Well, it's not the first time he's spoken to these people. Remember, this is the first letter. Remember, what letter is this? This is the letter that we know as 1 Corinthians. So he's visited these people at least once before. And he's writing this letter to them over evidently a lot of problems they're having. For I received from Yahweh, which I delivered to you, that Yahshua, on the same night in which he was betrayed, he took bread. He'd given thanks, he broke it. He said, take this. This is my body, which is broken for you. And do this in remembrance of me. This breaking of the bread was not in the original Passover service. Found needed. This part of the program, if you will, this ritual, this rite, call it what you will, has its own meaning and has to do with something being instituted in due season. The same manner, took the cup. After supper, he said, this is the new covenant in my blood. Do this as often as this do, and as often as you drink it, in remembrance of me. For as often as you eat this bread and drink this cup, you proclaim the Master's death until he comes. Therefore, Whoever eats this bread and drinks this cup of the master in an unworthy manner will be guilty of the body and blood of the master, or of Yahweh. But let a man examine himself, to let him eat the bread and drink of the cup. Well, so let a man examine himself. He said, don't, go ahead, let him do it. Let him eat, let him drink. It's not our place to judge whether a man is worthy or not. It says, let a man examine himself. He takes his own risk. We don't decide who is and is not unworthy. We make sure we're worthy ourselves. For this reason, many are weak and sick amongst you, and many sleep. For if we would judge ourselves, we would not be judged. Again, if we would judge ourselves, we would not be judged. We are to examine ourselves and place judgment on ourselves, and we'll be honest with ourselves. Now, do we have any cases in Scripture of people being judged by Yahweh? We got plenty. But before we go, let's read of a couple of these, shall we? Of people having received, people who believe. We're not talking about the world. I want to make that clear. Anything we look at is not going to be of those ugly Assyrians who had it coming and didn't know any better, or those stupid Babylonians, or anybody else. We're not talking about the pagan nation. We're talking about Israel. We'll be talking about particularly the body of believers. In particular, and when I say Israel, would it matter which? But let's continue. Would it be those who are supposed to believe, defined as the children of Abraham? Or those who were born Israelites? Those who, well, even back in the older time, there were those who did know better, or were supposed to know better. Let's look. Please. Let's look at what something might cause this. Then we'll. In 1 Corinthians 5, verse 1. We got the case of a man who'd taken his father's wife. Now this is not, it doesn't mean, and when it says his father's wife, it does not mean his mother. The case here is a man that his father had married. That was not his mom. But it wasn't just that, it was the church's response to this. Let's fast forward to verse 6. Your glorying is not good. Do you know that a little leaven leavens the whole lump? Therefore purge out the old leaven, that you may be a new lump, that since you are truly unleavened. For indeed, our Passover was sacrificed for us. And let us keep the faith, not with old leaven, but with the leaven of malice, nor with the leaven of malice and wickedness. So in this case, leaven means malice and wickedness. But with the unleavened bread of sincerity and truth. Let's keep going to verse 9 here. Let's go and finish this chapter. I wrote to you in my epistle not to keep company with sexually immoral people. But yet I did not mean with the sexually immoral people of this world, or with the covetous. Or, he's got a little list going here. Or with the covetous, the extortioners, the idolaters, since then you would need to go out of the world. Because we're going to avoid any and all exposure to what is unholy, what is unrighteous. We're going to have to leave this world. But we can't do that. We're still flesh. We got nowhere to go that can sustain us. For what do I have to do with judging those who are outside? Do you not judge those who are inside, but those who are outside, Yahweh judges. Therefore, put away from yourselves the evil person. Then he goes on through, in chapter 6, he goes on through brethren suing each other, taking each other to court over offenses. Paul has a few things to say about them, a few choice words about them as well. Verse 4, let's pick it up in verse 4. If you then have judgments concerning things pertaining to this life, do you suppose those who are least esteemed by the church to judge? I say this to your shame. Is it so that there is not a wise man among you, even one who will be able to judge between his brethren? But brother goes to law against brother, and that before unbelievers. Now therefore, it is already an utter failure that you go to law against one another. Would you rather not accept the wrong? Why do you not rather let yourselves be cheated? No, but you yourselves do wrong. But you yourselves do wrong. You do wrong and cheat, and you do those to your brethren. So it seems in this case here that when Paul is correcting, if you will, admonishing, the Corinthian assembly, he's taking people going against the law of each other, but they're guilty of the same thing. Do you not know that? Verse 9, do you not know that the unrighteous will not inherit the kingdom of Yahweh? Do not be deceived, neither fornicators, nor idolaters, nor adulterers, nor homosexuals, nor sodomites, nor thieves, covetous, drunkards, nor revilers, nor extortioners will inherit the kingdom of Yahweh. And such were some of you. But you were washed, but you were sanctified, and you were justified in the name of Master Yahshua and the Spirit of our Elohim. So again, what's the pattern here? We got people, a congregation of people who are believers and supposed to know better than these things that they're doing, and they're still acting contrary to it. We see a good long pattern of unrepentant sin. And it's a long pattern of unrepentant sin. He's not stopping at just one. And he's also correcting, we've seen where he's said something to these people about them acting like the world. Because when he says he will judge the world, let Yahweh do that. Paul said he has nothing to do with any commentary about judging the world. No, but he said, we were told, we read a couple times about him telling the church to judge themselves. Any question or comment so far? Anyone? Now, let's look. At a possible case study. Let's look at a case study here on how some of this just might work. And now we got this good list of things we're not supposed to be doing, and the conduct of the brethren. Let's turn back to Acts, please. Let's turn to Acts 5. And we're going to review the case of Ananias and Sapphira. We're going to start in verse 1, Acts chapter 5. But a certain man named Ananias, with Sapphira his wife, sold the possession. But he kept back a part of the proceeds, and his wife also being aware of it. He brought a certain part of it and laid it kept back a certain part of it and laid it at the disciples' feet. But Peter said to Ananias, why has Satan filled your heart to lie to the Holy Spirit and keep back part of the price of the land for yourself? It's a very interesting comment by Peter. Yes, why has Satan filled your heart? Can anyone have any thoughts or ideas about that? Remember, because or are they still, all right, Jeff?
Take every thought captive. So if you got a thought coming in that don't line up with the word, that's Satan.
Take every thought captive. Evidently they had not taken every thought captive. Agreed to take it over, it seems like. And while it remained, Peter says in verse 4, was it not your own? And after it was sold, was it not in your control? Yeah, after it was sold, the money was theirs. It was theirs. Peter doesn't say you owed us every dime. That's not what he's saying. He's saying it was yours. It was in your control. So why have you conceived this thing in your heart? You have not then lied to men, but unto Yahweh. So what was this thing they kept in their heart? Well, part of the answer is actually we found back up in Acts 4. Let's pick it up mark your place here. We're going to back up to Acts 4 and pick it up in verse 32. Now the multitude of those who believed were of one heart and one soul. Evidently, Ananias and Sapphira, well, they evidently were not of one heart and one soul with the rest of the bunch. Neither did anyone say that any of these things he possessed was his own, but they held all things in common. And with great power the apostles gave witness to the resurrection of the Master Yahweh, great grace amongst them all. Nor was there anyone who lacked, for all were possessors of lands or houses, sold them, and they brought the proceeds of the things that were sold. And they laid them down at the disciples' feet, and they distributed to each as anyone had need. And Joseph was also named Barnabas by the apostles, which is translated as son of encouragement, a Levite of the country of Cyprus, having land, sold it, and brought the money and laid it at the apostles' feet. So when these people, and an example was set specifically by Barnabas, when he had land and sold it, the proceeds of it were laid down at the disciples' feet. These people held back a part of it. Now remember, but let's look back at, he said, back up in verse 4, it was in part because they didn't lay out all of it down, but that wasn't even just that. It was, what did he say? What does Peter say in verse 4? You have not lied, not to men, but unto Yahweh. The idea was, seemingly, was to give a show that they were laying it all down. Well, in fact, secretly keeping part of it. Now, for a simple, honest statement, it said, okay, Peter, I've sold a piece of land. This is what I'm giving you. And the simple explanation that he needed it for something else, well, that might have been okay. That might have been acceptable. People buy, sell, need for needs all the time. And there was nothing in the law that would have prohibited him from such a thing. A tithe would have sufficed according to the law. Verse 5, but it was a lie. It was a false pretense. That's what brought this about. Then Ananias, hearing these words, fell down and breathed his last. So great fear came upon all those who heard these things. The young man arose, wrapped him up, and carried him out, and they buried him. Now it was about 3 hours later when his wife came in, not knowing what had happened. Peter answered her, he says, tell me whether you sold the land for so much. And she said, yes, for so much. We sold it for this price. And Peter said to her, how is it that you have agreed together to test the Spirit of Yahweh? Because look, the feet of those who have buried your husband are now at the door, and they will carry you out also. And immediately she fell down at his feet and breathed her last. And the young man came in and found her dead too, and carried her out, and they buried her next to her husband. So we have an example of people, another example of people keeping back part of the proceeds that suffered the death penalty as well. Did they say keep part of when something was supposed to belong all to Yahweh? Anyone think of an example?
Oh, the band.
Hmm?
The band when he put stuff in his tent.
The man when he, yes, thank you very much, yes. The man when he put stuff in his tent after the collapse of Jericho, yes, you're correct. Yes, Jeff.
The only difference I see is they must have came in agreement that they were gonna give 100%.
That's the point, that was the,
And then kept something hiddenly out.
Mhm.
If they would've said, well, I'm gonna give you whatever, I may need a little, that'd be different, but that's what I see, cause there's no true, you know what I mean? You can give whatever, there's no law to that.
right. But it was, no, you're correct, it was the appearance of having given all. That, they went contrary to a common agreement, I suppose, yes.
Seeking their own glory
Seeking their own glory
and lying.
and lying about it. Yes, Trey.
It all boils down to doing things wholeheartedly. And we read that in Revelation 3:15 about being lukewarm. These people, these examples you're giving, they are acting like they're doing things 100%, but they're not, and you can fool man, but you can't fool the Father, is what he's trying to say.
You'll
So
never fool a father.
that's why you're not lying to them, you're lying to Elohim. Just like when we were talking about earlier, with the eating and drinking, you're supposed to be coming together over the Passover, breaking the bread with each other in remembrance of the life that was given for you, drinking the wine for the life that was given for you. So when some people are getting drunk and full and other people aren't getting nothing, then you then throw away the whole purpose of it. Is you're eating. That's why it says you're eating to your own damnation. They're not doing it wholeheartedly. They're just doing it out of the banquet.
Just to be doing.
Yeah.
And on top of that, being stingy and having an evil eye.
And they had the evil eye that we read of in Proverbs. You're correct, Jeff. That evil eye.
So the Lord doesn't like oath breakers. If you're gonna promise something, stick to your promise.
Mm-hmm. You're correct. Let's see, I seem to recall another account. Of some fellas. On whom Yahweh extracted a judgment. Some people, because there's a pattern of all these things. We got, in number 16, we got the rebellion of Korah, those who followed him. What they do, they accused Moses and Aaron of, well, you just think you're better than everybody. You take too much on yourself, and all the rest of us are holy. What was really the idea? They really wanted to take over the priesthood. They were putting on this righteous forward act. They were forwarding this righteous act to make themselves look righteous to the congregation, when they really had alternative motives, and that was actually to seize the priesthood and the leadership of Israel. We have the death, we have the account of the sons of Levi. All the things they did. And they of all people were they were the priests. They were some of the most unrighteous in all Israel.
Yeah, Yeshua said they didn't keep the law.
And they didn't keep the law, that's correct. I did have Revelation 3 in here, so let's just go there right now. Revelation 3, verse 15. Revelation 3:14 actually. To the angel of the church of the Laodiceans write. These things says the Amen, the faithful, the true witness, the beginning of the creation of Yahweh. I know your works, that you're neither hot or cold. And I wish that you were hot or cold. So then, because you are lukewarm and neither hot or cold, I will vomit you out of my mouth. Well, what was lukewater? What value did it have back in that day? It's pretty much good just for inducing vomiting. Because Laodicea had this notoriously hot, or this terrible water supply. This worthless water supply. It was neither hot, neither cold. Because if you make water hot, you can use it for bathing, for cooking, brewing coffee. If it's cold, it's good for nothing like a good cold drink of water on a summer day when you're thirsty. Yes, Jeff.
Double-minded.
You're double-minded. Now we're getting somewhere because these people are double-minded. On one hand, they know better. On the other hand, they're not doing it. It seems to be we have a pattern of a righteous front. Let's turn to John 2.
Once again, sometime, if you're gonna do good, keep doing good. If you're gonna be bad, keep doing bad. Don't try to jump back and forth.
Can't jump back and forth. If you stayed bad, it could be you could have been said you didn't know any better. Well, I mean, but you'd been better had you never known the truth. Phrase it that way. Let us turn to Matthew 23. And Yahshua spoke to them, picking up verse 1, Matthew 23, verse 1. Then Yahshua spoke to the multitudes and to his disciples, and he said, well, the scribes and the Pharisees sat in Moses. Therefore, what do they tell you? To observe, do that observe and do, but don't do according to their works. Because they say and they do not do. You mean just like we read of the Corinthian church in 1 Corinthians 11? 1 Corinthians 5 and 6 and 11? For they bind heavy burdens, hard to bear. They lay them on men's shoulders, but they themselves will not move from one of their fingers. But by all their works, they do to be seen by men. They make their phylacteries broad and enlarge the borders of their garments. They love the best place at the feast, the best seats in the synagogues. You mean like the people who carried on and got drunk at the Passover? Like we read about in 1 Corinthians 11? They took the best places, got all the food, got all the drink, when another man got nothing. And he goes on here, and on, and on. About this correction, about the scolding of the scribes and Pharisees. And these, again, were the people that were supposed to have known better and did not. But they put this righteous, glorious, righteous front, when in fact they were corrupt.
Curtis?
Yes, David.
It's almost like the opposite of the mindset that we should have. If you are doing something to elevate yourself, that's totally opposite of what Yahshua said. If we read verse 23:10 and 23:11.
Do that.
Neither be ye called masters, for one is your master, even Messiah. So we shouldn't be trying to elevate ourselves to master over someone else.
That's right.
Verse 11 says, but he that is greatest among you shall be your servant. We are to serve. The servant mindset is more important than the master mindset or the authoritative mindset in which the Pharisees and Sadducees were partaking of or portraying back then.
When you try to make yourself look more important, you deny the glory of God.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're correct.
That's a good point.
That is. Yes, John, no? Okay. Because in 1 Corinthians 11, he corrected the people for having taken each other to court, amongst other things, but while suing the brethren while they were themselves were doing in the same conduct. They were acting like the world.
And going to the world.
And going to the world to resolve their problem.
Abraham's wife said, let Yah judge between us.
Mm-hmm. They cheated brethren? Well, how does it apply here? Well, let's see. Let's jump down to remaining in Matthew 23. What do you scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites? For you devour houses, for pretense make long prayers, and therefore you will receive the greater condemnation. So, I mean, we're going to make a greater condemnation for making a false pretense, as happened to Ananias and Sapphira. As some of these people in 1 Corinthians 11 who were being judged as being weak and sickly, had fallen asleep for their conduct. For the sake of time, I'll just refer you to the rest of this one, Matthew 23. Because in part they were acting like the scribes and the Pharisees. And whose sons did Joshua say they were? I seem to recall in John 8, they were the father of the devil. You are correct. They were accusing him of having a demon. No, Joshua straightened that out and said, no, you're your father's devil because you do what he wants. You do his desires. They tended their own desires and their father's desires. And his father's will they obeyed. And they delighted in doing it. And this is kind of some of the conduct in which he laid them out for. Verse 23, woe to you scribes and hypocrites, scribes and Pharisees, you hypocrites, for you pay a tithe of the mint and anise and cumin, and you have neglected the weightier matters of the law, justice, mercy, and faith. These you ought to have done without leaving the others undone. Straight out on that, and you swallow a camel. Verse 25, what do you scribes and Pharisees, you hypocrites? For you cleanse the outside of the cup and the dish, but they're full of extortion and self-indulgence. Just like Paul scolded the assembly at Corinth, They were, for some of them being extortioners. And every bit of this, as we've gone through, I'll just refer you to this for the sake of time. And it all has to do with matters of the heart, the unconverted heart, the uncircumcised heart, and unrepented sin, and henceforth double-mindedness. Because they need all the effort to lay out this righteous front. They tried to look great on the outside, but on the inside they were full of dead men's bones. Let's close, please, in Ephesians 6. I want to close with Ephesians 6. What do we do? Finally, my brethren, be strong in Yahweh, verse 10. And in the power of his might. Put on the whole armor of Yahweh, that you will be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. Remember Peter's question to Ananias, why has the devil filled your heart? Why did Satan do this? He did not have on his proverbial armor. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities and against powers, and against rulers of the darkness of this age, and against spiritual hosts wickedness in heavenly places. Therefore, take up the whole armor of Yahweh, that you may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all, to stand. Stand therefore, having your waist girded with truth, having put on the breastplate of righteousness, and your feet shod with the preparation of the gospel of peace, and above all, the shield of faith, with which you will be able to quench all the fiery darts of the wicked one. It doesn't say some of them or most of them, it says all of them. Take the helmet of salvation, the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of Yahweh. Is there any other question or comment? If not, we'll close here, and we'll be back at 3 o'clock with David Gibson